Hey, welcome back to Diabolic Shrimp, the least professional talk show on the internet. I'm your host, bestselling author and comic creator Josh Grant, and it's so great to get to say those words again. We've been off on a brief hiatus lately, and this is our final show of the season. Diabolic Shrimp always kind of goes to sleep for the summer in the United States anyway, and so we go to sleep for a couple of months, and then we'll be back in August with season 3. So we're rounding out season 2 here, and what a great way to round it out, because tonight, Diabolic Shrimp, we have several experts in the genre of mystery that are about to come on here. They have different expertise in different areas of mystery, and we're a live show. So if you have questions for our experts on here, or you just have comments or you want to ask them something, over in the live chat over there, if you're watching us live, go ahead and throw those questions over there. I'd love to bring you on here. We love being interactive on this show. If you want to give them a shout out or ask them a question, and definitely if you just stumbled upon this show, I love to interview interesting and famous people from around the world. So if you want to join me in that journey, check down below, hit that subscription button, and join us in that journey. But yes, we have 3 experts coming on tonight, and so without further ado, I do want to bring them on. So welcome to Diabolic Shrimp.
Hey, Josh.
Hey, Blair, and hey, Amy. It's so great to have Blair's been on before. Check back in our earlier videos. Blair's been a longtime member of Diabolic Shrimp, so has Amy, and so check back in those earlier videos. You can actually hear all about Blair's books. Blair joining us all the way from Australia. Amy, I'm not sure actually where you're joining us from, but
Baltimore, Maryland. So Blair, I don't know whether it's already tomorrow where you are, or the middle of the night.
No kidding. Well, Amy, it's great to have you on. Just a bit about them. Blair wrote the Jack Lisbon detective series. Fantastic series. I've read pretty much all of your books, Blair, and it's just a great hard-boiled detective kind of series. Amy's kind of our more generalized expert. I read, especially from Amy, I loved Fran the second time around. That was one of my favorites of yours. And so, but Amy writes a lot of great, kind of varied, different books. Like, yeah, I was gonna say is that you're our kind of expert that's in like various genres. So you get to be our expert that kind of pulls us into different ones. And then we are the least professional talk show on the internet. Our poor Kelley Kaye is another one of our guests, and we were having some technical issues. So maybe she'll be back in, maybe she won't. And she's our cozy mystery expert. She wrote Death by Diploma. If you're interested in any of these books, by the way, they're all down in the description below. So please do support these authors. And Andrew Hintz, another author, loves supporting other authors. Wonderful person, wonderful care for other people. She says, "Hey there, super excited for another great show." Andrew, that's always so kind of you. I always love having you on the show as well. And so, well, we'll see if we can get Kelley on here in just a second. But well, let's start this out. I'm going to throw this out to actually both of you, Blair and Amy. And I'm curious, just to start us off, what are some of the essentials to making a good mystery? There's so much that goes to that. And again, Amy writes in a lot of different genres, but all your books do have a really good like mystery element to them. So Blair, Amy, like what are some of those essentials to making a good mystery? Let's start with Blair, and then we'll jump to you, Amy.
Okay, well, as a reader, I think the absolutely number one essential thing is not to know who the killer is or the perpetrator early on. There are a lot of writers who give it away too early. There's also television shows, they call it like a reverse mystery, where they throw up, you already know right at the beginning, but then it's more a psychological journey of the detective or whatever trying to hunt this killer down. So we're following, you follow the killer from the beginning, and then you follow the detective, and it's a battle between the two. But my mysteries are more, you get a hint of who it might be at the beginning. Often I'll use the point of view of the killer, but not give their name or too much detail away, just something that they're thinking. But often I don't even know who the killer is myself until I'm near the end. I'm a great believer in a theory called writing into the dark. I think I mentioned this to you once before, Josh. The guy who came up with this phrase, his name's Dean Wesley Smith, and he's what they call a pantser, and I'm one of those as well. The opposite of that's a plotter. So the plotter will know from, they will plan the entire book from start to finish. Where I won't do that. I'll have a general idea, and so maybe there are a handful of suspects, and it could be any of them. And it won't be until, the second last or the third last chapter before a bit of a resolution happens that anybody figures it out. But once you get to the end, in your editing process, I'll often go back and throw in a few clues here and there that I didn't put in the first draft, just to give people a chance to try and guess who it is. So in a nutshell, I think a mystery is the lack of knowledge, is not knowing who the culprit, the perpetrator, the killer, the bad guy, who it is. So they're shrouded in it's like they've got a bag over their head, and right at the end, like in Scooby-Doo, when Fred pulls the thing off and says, "Who have we got here?" and you find out who it is. The great reveal.
Well, it's like if it's lack of knowledge, then I must be like the emperor of mystery, because I have like very little knowledge in life. So well, Amy, here, let's jump down. So Blair brought up that interesting thought of like writing into the dark. I love that, and it's like and that idea of like, sometimes we as writers sometimes can surprise ourselves. Then that's when it gets really fun, when your work takes on a life of its own. But I'm curious, what are your thoughts, Amy, on like what are some of those essentials for writing good mystery?
Right. Well, I think Blair brought up some really key points. One of which is writing a book where you are both a pantser and a plotter, and I would say that I do a bit of both. And the great magic happens when you are pantsing it, where reading, the inspiration is coming into the moment because you just know where you are in time and space in your story, and you're figuring out what's going on, which is terrific. And but the other thing that you raised, Blair, that I think is so fun and interesting about mysteries is this notion of not a whodunit but a whydunit. If you begin with a corpse on page one, you already know there's a dead body, you know who died, but you don't know why, and you may not know who the killer is. And I will say that certainly in the book that I've written, the Potrero Complex, I'm actually fundamentally much more interested in what the circumstances were around the fact that a murder or murders were committed. Why did this happen? Why were the conditions right for this to happen? So I think I'm trying to ask some bigger questions, not so much as a guessing or figuring it out. Which, the great thing about the genre is that there's so many different ways of telling these stories.
Yeah, well, and I love that idea of that why done it. That's it's like more that process. I mean, it's almost like it's similar almost to like the romance genre, right? It's like in romance, it's like they're gonna fall in love at the end of the book or whatever. It's like what you're getting into, but how that happens is the fascinating part, and what that makes you feel. So interesting. Okay, well, here, Blair, let's jump to you for starters on this one. Like, how realistic should a mystery be? Since you write a little bit more realistic, like I can see you have Kill Shot there in the background. It's a little bit more realistic with Jack Lisbon. It's a little bit more hard boiled, but you have a lot of flair in yours, with your characters, and I really love your characters and how they grow. So how realistic should a mystery be, and how do you find that balance, or should it be realistic? I mean, like, where do you kind of draw the line personally?
Yeah, sure. I do a lot of research as I go. In particular, like forensics research, I've been doing a lot of that, a lot more of that recently. Usually on the fly as I'm writing the story. Like I don't sit down and as if I'm writing a thesis or something like that. But if for example, someone gets strangled, I want to find out what happens to the human body in that process. So then I'll go and do a bit of research on that. And I
Is
make sure.
this where the FBI has you on their like watch list or something? Like this
Well,
man in Australia keeps typing in strangulation of people.
Yeah, nothing like a good old fashioned garrotting, but don't look at the search history, of course. All writers joke about that. If they get FBI looks at the search history of their internet patterns, they're in big trouble. But of course, you have to suspend disbelief a lot. I mean, my main character, Jack Lisbon, he was. He came from the UK, he came from London. He was kicked out of the Metropolitan Police for corruption. He comes to Australia and he kind of, redeems himself in a way. But he ends up in a smallish town. It's a bit like Cabot Cove, with Murder, She Wrote. And, if you watch that on TV, you think, why do people even live in this town? People getting killed every week, like, why would that? Well, the same with my series, so that you're suspending disbelief in that sense, like in this small town, these momentous murders take place of famous people passing through, or rich people, influential people. Of course, these sort of incidents aren't going to be happening in a small town all the time, but they are in my series, and people, they have to put that aside. But, I do tend to, I make sure I get my facts. I try and get my facts straight with, ballistics and forensics and geographic detail, things like that. But outside of that, I just let my imagination run wild, especially with the human behavior. Yeah.
Nice. Well, it's like, I love like, because I think you in your series, you really did like capture that. Like there's that magic and there's that nuance of like, in my belief, I'm like, if it's ever comes down to realism or like just having some fun with it, like I always go with just have some fun with it. To be honest, I sacrifice realism every time, but I'm like, but I think you found that really nice balance. And
well, there's a fantastic meme. No. It was a in a review on Amazon. Somebody wrote, "I can't." It's like the author was making it up as he went along. It's terrible, Of course they are fiction.
Well, and yeah, definitely. I was like, well, all right. So let's jump back over to Amy here. Whereas Amy, you tend to have kind of almost like a paranormal or something going on in a lot of your books. There's always like this kind of a different element to it. And so what is it like? Yours tend to be a lot of other genres, but you always have a great like mystery element to it. So what is it about mystery that makes it the perfect genre to fit into other genres?
Well, what I love to do in each of my books is I like to take the real world as we know it and then shift it, move it a few notches over, or move it a little bit into the future where something might happen that's not that far fetched. So in the Potrero complex, really the reason that there's a mystery at the heart of the book is because of a lot of other things that have happened. And a lot of what's going on is, while of course the protagonist, who's a pretty weary, cynical journalist, is thrown into having to figure out why there are teenagers missing in town. So we have the heart of our mystery. The book is a lot about her figuring out that why. No, it is also figuring out what happened, but it's also the why. And so my book has a kind of a speculative and also a kind of a dystopian bent to it, because there are things going on about 10 years from now in a possible future that make all these things possible, where there's terrible stuff. In mine, the bad stuff, the really bad stuff is happening off stage, but the consequences are very much on stage.
Nice. Well, I definitely connect you on some of that, especially starting in I started in like horror, and so I'm connecting with Blair too. Like when I started in my first horror book was Pandora. It's one of my bestsellers, but it's like it was on a cruise ship, so I was always looking up like cruise ship engine room and sinking a cruise ship or something. It's like I was trying to like look at these things, and I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely gonna get picked up by someone. But I definitely connected with like with both of you actually. It's like something showing that like why. I love adding like a lot of mystery into every one of my stories. I love that idea of like not knowing, like Blair says, like writing into that dark. And I always personally, like when I write, I have a very clear idea where I'm going to begin. I have a very clear idea where I end, and I somehow get lost along the way. And I think that's actually wonderful sometimes, because sometimes that's when it's taking on a life of its own, and you don't know sometimes who the villain really is. And so, okay, well, so how much like that's the tricky part though when it comes to any sort of mystery. It's like, how much should you reveal along the way? Like, what do you think, Blair?
Well, not very much at all. I think I like to plant motive. I think I like to give characters a lot of potential motive, so people would, reader will think, well, this guy's got a reason to do that, and so is this one, and so is that one. But that I never point out, why they would do it. For example, there's the jealous husband. You've got jealousy, you've got financial motives, you've got what else have you got?
My only motive is food, so I'll murder over food if I have to.
Well, I would
you've
say
got
that
the thrill killers as well. Revenge. If someone was treated badly in childhood, so you can give each of them a little bit of a motive along the way, but the threads aren't sewn together until maybe 5/8 of the way through, and it all starts to dawn on the detective. But then you send them down a blind alley here and there as well, like send them down a lead. They think they've got it. Oh no, it's not him. Oh damn it, it's another guy altogether.
Yeah, I would say that in my book, a journalist is standing in for the role of the detective, and that she's the one who needs to. The moral burden falls to her to solve what's going on. Well, her mostly, as well as a sort of a bereft police officer who rallies in the end. But it's there's I think exactly to what Blair said. There's a bunch of clues. There really is a puzzle at the heart of this, and a bunch of clues that you are not given until close to 5/8 of the way through, because the clues themselves are not known or recovered. And once those clues start to fall into place, with enough people helping to figure stuff out, the mystery begins to fall into place. And then I will say I throw a twist in at the end that helps the story to kind of knit itself up. And I won't give away what that is, but let's just say that someone who was not expected to make an appearance makes an appearance, and it brings clues to the fore that are very necessary to figuring out what's going on. So you get this very late first-person testimony to what's been going on, which really helps to figure out, to help bring the mystery to a conclusion.
Interesting. Well, and I again, connecting with both of you, it's like I love, in like, in books, I love this nice little tool called perspective shift. It's like where I love to, like, it's like you show people stuff all along the way, and then kind of like what you were saying, Amy, you had that person or whatever that shows up late in the game, and all along you thought you were seeing something, and then you realize, oh, it's totally different than what I was thinking it was. And it's that perspective shift. And that's my number one favorite, like, literary tool. I love to do it in all my books. I love to have that twist where it's like, oh, so-and-so wasn't who you thought they were.
Well, whatever the reader thinks is happening up to that point, there's no way that they guessed this. And Blair's point, you don't want people to figure stuff out. And so I was very concerned about that as well, and making sure that there's no way they can figure this out. And while it's logical in the end, there's no way you could know that ahead of time until things sort of, reveal themselves. Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, well, I think that's part of the fun of, like, kind of like Blair, what you were saying is, kind of being a pantser and just kind of writing it yourself, because you truly are, as an author, surprised, and typically then the reader will also be surprised, because it's like, oh, I wasn't actually planning this person to be the bad guy. I had that in my one of my books. I had a twist. I'm like, I have to do this. I hate it because it's like, I don't like what happens with this character, and it wasn't what I was planning for them originally, but I'm like, oh, but that's so good, I got to go with it. And that was my closest to being, I think, a pantser than in my life. I'm kind of a blend between the two. So what is, like, I love getting excited over characters, and I love that where it's like, oh, this twist I wasn't expecting came into my head and I have to do it, but I don't want to do it because it's like, it's so sad what happens or whatever, you know, it's like, but I have to. So what for you is the most exciting part of mystery or adding mystery to your story? We'll start with Amy and we'll jump back to you, Blair.
The most exciting part of adding mystery to the story? Is that the question?
Yeah, or just the mystery genre, or in your case, Amy, you do have a little, you know, especially one of yours is very much mystery genre, but a lot of yours you added mystery to the
Right.
story. So
Right.
what's the most exciting part of like having that mystery element?
I think the most exciting part of the mystery element is that there are things afoot that the reader, and even more to the point, the characters are unaware of. And it's their discovery process, it's what they learn and what they figure out that's really exciting, and I think gets the reader really drawn in to helping to figure this out and to figure out what's gone wrong. So it's that notion of there are things we don't know, and the characters don't know what they don't know until they know it. So I think that's really fun, and it's pretty tricky to figure that out, but that's really the fun part.
Nice. Well, what about you, Blair? What gets you excited about when it comes to
When you're
creating mystery?
I look at it as a reader. I mean, this is the genre that I prefer to read. You know, I do read some literary fiction. Some of my favorite books are not mystery books, but if I just want to entertain myself, I think entertainment is the key. Like if a book's not entertaining, I'm not interested. You know, I've just been researching some of the competition, you know, in my genre, and I just want to see what they're up to, and the ones that you know, sort of drag
so you can
along.
Take them down.
No. I like to share success.
I'm joking.
I want every writer.
I'm in an epic rivalry with James Patterson. Every time I'm writing a book, someone's like, "Oh, well, James Patterson like wrote like 7 books in the time it took you to write that," or something. And so everyone would say that to me. So James and I are secretly in a rivalry. He doesn't know it. So, but
yeah.
So go on. Sorry, Blair.
But mystery isn't the most important thing for me. The most important thing for me is character. You know, like Jack Lisbon for me, I just like to see him develop and grow. Like, you know, he started out as a complete scumbag, and gradually softening. There's even almost romantic elements going to be coming into the series as well. And I get feedback from readers saying, could you just please push that romance a bit? You know, he fancies this woman. Could something happen? And that's becoming more important to some readers than the actual mysteries. But I am going to make sure that the crime element stays to the forefront. Mysteries are just the most exciting thing to read, and that's why I put them in my stories.
Nice. Well, and I like how sometimes your focus does tend to change, right? Like, although that makes me excited that you're jumping into some of that romantic element for Jack Lisbon. I love your hard-boiled detective, but I was like, yes, go for it. And then,
he has a daughter he's estranged from as well, and people are writing to me, readers, and saying, you know, this daughter, I want to see more of the daughter. I think she could follow in Dad's footsteps, perhaps, and become a detective. She's only 12 years old at the moment, but. You know,
I want to see a 12-year-old hard-boiled detective. I want her to start beating people.
Well, there are kid detective stories, but that's another genre as well. You know, you got to take that hard-boiled element out of it.
Well, and both of you are fantastic about creating character too. Amy, again, Fran, the second time around, I loved that story. I loved Fran, and so. You know, it's fun though. I think mystery is just fun, especially that moment, kind of like Blair was saying earlier, like pulling that bag off the head, like Scooby-Doo. You know, it's like I love having a twist. I put a twist in every one of my books, and just because it's fun for me, especially I started with horror, even though I'm a big scaredy cat, and that was a great genre to have a lot of mystery in there. You know, because in horror, that's what you want. You don't want people to know what's going on. It's a variation of mystery, but it's just like that was part of the fun though. I'm a big scaredy cat, but it's like. It's fun being the person that springs the surprise on somebody, you know, and that's the same in mystery. And here before we jump into our we do have some you know, reader questions for you. Before we jump into that though, I'm curious, like you were just talking about character. Is the villain of a mystery or a story just as important as the hero to you, or do you tend to like just say like I want to focus on the hero and maybe the process more? So is the villain just as important as the hero, let's jump to you, Blair, and then I'll come back to you, Amy.
In some of my stories, the villain has a greater role than in others, and you want to sympathize with them a little bit more depending on the circumstances. In my story, Trick Shot, I won't give too much away, but there was elements of bullying and so on, and there's a bit of a revenge element, and the bad guy isn't 100% bad, so they had a motivation, that to do something horrible, but you can kind of understand them a little bit. Whereas other ones are motivated by greed and avarice and jealousy and all these, prime urges that, there is no excuse for. So yeah, the villains, they do take a backseat to Jack and his team, of course, and the victim, of course, very important. But yeah, a good villain. Some of my favorite literary characters are villains, like what's her name, Annie Wilkes. Speaking of Stephen King, I think wrote Misery, did he not?
Yep.
Yeah, like she's one of my favorite characters of all time. Yeah.
Until us as authors, we're all taught to watch out for her. We're all scared of her. Don't end up like getting stuck on her couch. Don't crash your car or anything. And so so Amy, how about you? Like is the villain as important as the hero?
Well, absolutely, because there's no great story without conflict, and it's hard to have conflict without good and evil battling in one form or another. As crazy as that can sometimes get. So villains are incredibly important. They're an important foil for the heroine or the protagonist or whatever you might want to call that person. And I know in my mystery thriller, the Potrero Complex, the villain is actually almost a borderline secondary character in that you don't get backstory to this character, but you don't need it. You don't need it because the villain sets so much in motion that's kind of awful, and is such a thorn in the side of the protagonist, the journalist who's standing in for the detective, essentially. That you get plenty of action from the villain, and you don't really need a lot of backstory there. You don't really need to know why the villain is the way he is. You just need to see what he does and the consequences. But yes, it's an incredibly important character, one way or the other.
Nice. And I'm always fascinated to see everyone's like writing style. And Amy, I just love how a lot more of yours is like kind of focused more on like the process and what's happening, and like you said, the why. And I just love how that even comes out almost in your villain.
It's not
so boring. no, I'm not saying boring. I was like, that's what I just love. It's like just that variety, and that's what we try to go for on this show and on our website too. So all right, so let's take a couple of our readers again. If you're watching this live, go ahead and throw any questions you got over there in the live chat. If you like, you're watching this later in the comment section down below. I always love to share with our authors. And so, but we have a few that were sent in ahead of time here. Book Lover 99 says, "What inspires you to write?" So, just in general, what inspires you to write, Amy?
Really, stories come from everywhere. They come from news headlines. They come from chance remarks. They come from dreams in the middle of the night. And I think when a good story presents itself, and it won't let you go, that's the story that you have to write. And so it really can come from anywhere. And that really is the inspiration, is that desire to create these worlds, to explore, essentially, I know it might sound pretentious, but it's really true, to explore the human condition, which is what all literature does in every single genre, because humans are what we have to work with, unless we're Watership Down and we're writing out about rabbits and so forth. But then we're giving them anthropomorphic characteristics anyway. We're still writing about humans.
Let's hope humans are never like Watership Down. That gave me like nightmares as a child.
or hobbits, right?
There we go. We're
always writing about people and who we are and why we are the way we are, and so the inspiration for that can come from anywhere.
Nice. And I definitely I love that you kind of threw out there that it's that story that once it kind of hooks in your brain and you have to tell it, that's the one you got to write.
Yes.
And that's what someone was asking me recently. They're like, how do you know which story to write because I'm always having like all these ideas. And I'm like, honestly, the one I can't stop thinking about, that's the one that you have to make as an author. Blair, what inspires you?
I was just going to say, Amy, that's interesting. You mentioned Watership Down because I reread that quite recently, and so there's some great characters in there, Hazel and so on. Yeah, it's a great story. What inspires me to write? I just like to make up stuff and have people buy it. It's crazy, isn't it? And to give them pleasure. I get so much pleasure out of people contacting me out of the blue, you know, because I run a newsletter, as most independent authors do these days, to keep in touch with their readers. And the feedback, I get stories, like long stories, suggestions of plots and characters and so forth. I really love that interaction with the readers. That's not what inspired me in the beginning, of course. I never thought that would happen. But I've got, you know, I'm a lot of great writers, almost not heroes, but, you know, I look up to some of the great writers, you know, Joseph Heller and going back to Dostoevsky, like, you know, Crime and Punishment, one of the first mysteries ever written, you know. So
just don't say James Patterson, or I had to boot you off this. No, we're having our rivalry still.
Are you being paid per mention? You've already mentioned him once. Like, come on.
He and I are in an epic battle together. So
on
my side, though.
It feeds on my love of reading, actually. So I've been reading since I was maybe 3 or 4 years old, and I just devour books. And one day I thought, well, I can do that, and turned out I could. So I think 20 years ago, my mother signed me up for a correspondence course in writing, and it was like a birthday present for me. I thought, what are you doing, Mother? This is ridiculous. Anyway, I did this course, and it was for writing children's books, actually. And I have written a children's book. The first book I ever wrote was a children's book, self-published one. But I get a lot more joy out of writing for adults, actually. Yeah. So I've written.
I love, like you brought up too. It's like that. You know, it's like there is a difference sometimes between what inspired you to start writing and what inspires you to keep going sometimes. And I love that. I love that connection piece. That's why I started Diabolic Shrimp. I just wanted to connect with other authors and readers and connect people together. And that's what this is all about, is that community. And it's a great way to connect with people, and it can kind of inspire you to go in whole different directions sometimes. And also, that's honestly like selling books. Sometimes it's like, it can actually be very inspiring to, like, when you sell like one book. My very first book, when I published it, in the first year I sold like 6 books, and I like sold like a grand total of 6 over the course of like the year, and that was still really inspiring to me. And so all right, so this one's from ultra form. How do I make a good twist? How do I make a good twist? Amy, you want to try and tackle that?
Well, I really think that it starts with being able to think as a writer and to think as a reader. Because as a writer, if you're really going to have a twist, you want to know what it is, and you want to work out how your characters figure it out and or respond to it. So how does it work in their world? Not your world, but your character's world. And at the same time, you need to be working on another plane and think, what is the reader going to be thinking as they read page by page, kind of scene by scene, and what are they going to know and what are they going to guess? And if you're really going to create a surprise, because a twist usually implies a surprise, it has to be organic to the story that you're writing, that can take the writers by surprise, although the motive for the twist and the conditions for the twist are still inside that story. So something in there is unfolding, but that doesn't mean that your reader knows what's unfolding. So you, as the author, you can see the future, but the reader, you don't want the reader to see quite as much of the future as you can. I think it's tricky, and I think that we don't always get that quite right. How many times have we read a book or heard someone who read a book and said, oh, I saw that coming a mile away. And so that's a case where maybe the writer didn't quite create the suspension of disbelief for the reader. But if you can, and the writer can get to that page where that twist presents itself and go, oh, they didn't see it coming, but then they see why it came, and then they understand how it fits. That's sort of I think that's kind of the trifecta.
Nice. Oh, and thanks for trying to tackle that too, Amy. I was like, I absolutely love twists, but I'm like, I never know how to like explain like how to create a twist. I used to be a teacher. I used to be an elementary teacher, and I taught the kids about twists. But I'm like, I have no idea how to explain how to create a twist. And so, but Blair, you kind of chortled at it. Like, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, because I was in our earlier discussion, Amy said something, I can't remember what it was, but I was going to say twists are a great element, but explaining how to do it is almost impossible. It's just something that occurs to you at a particular moment in the story when you turn something on its head, where a character behaves in a completely antithetical way, like someone who's supposed to be a nurturing profession, for example, turns out to be a killer, like a doctor or somebody like that. I mean, that's pretty superficial, but I can give a couple of examples from popular culture, I guess. Ghost, these are from film rather than books, where he's dead and he doesn't know he's dead, and you don't know he's dead until later, almost at the end. And also, I think it was The Sixth Sense that Bruce Willis.
Sixth Sense is definitely one of my favorite perspective shifts.
Yeah.
I think I picked that. I thought at some point, I think that kid's dead. So there's some examples, but the technical manner in which to achieve or to produce it, I can't explain it really. I think Amy did a pretty good job.
Yeah, well, that's I think The Sixth Sense film is such a good way to talk about this sometimes because it's so vivid, right? The Sixth Sense is such a great example where the world building is so real because you're so focused on the viewer shares Bruce Willis's discovery. Like we kind of know what he knows and we understand what he understands. And by the time you get to the big reveal, the twist, you're as astonished as he is that Bruce Willis. Well, I'm sorry, giving everything away. Bruce Willis doesn't know that he's dead. It's astonishing, but we're totally with it. Like they just made it all believable up to that point. So you buy everything. I think, twists don't work if they come out of nowhere. The twist, it can surprise you, but it still has to be believable. And that's really tricky. That's a tricky thing.
Well, I think you kind of hit it on the head earlier too. It's like, and we've been all kind of talking about this a little bit. It's all about these like I think Blair, you mentioned motivations earlier. I think it's all about like motivations. Build some good characters, and they all have a motivation. So it's more about answering that kind of big question, like Amy said, why? Like why are they doing this? And if you can kind of answer some of that, like sometimes a twist will naturally form. And that's where I had my big aha moment in one of my books. And again, I was like, I don't want to do this to this character, but it's so good and it fits the story so well. And it's like the big why. And that was one of my favorite twists to ever create, because I actually myself, kind of like Blair was talking about, like writing Into the Dark, it's like I had to go back and I add a couple more details, because I'm like, it's like you don't see it coming, but I also wanted to add a few things so people can guess if they want. And so sometimes I think it's more about that motivation, that why. And if you can kind of get there, then you can kind of have that perspective shift of suddenly here's a piece of information and it's like, oh, that person was dead all along or whatever, So all right, so here's a good one. Because we often think, when we think mystery, we think murder mystery, because that's always the most prevalent, and it's the most fun sometimes, because it's like, what's higher than the stakes than murder, right? And it's like, but it says moist font. I don't know. And so, sorry for butchering your username. Are there any good mysteries without murder?
I will put my hand up for my latest book, Shot to the Heart, which I think you've read, Joshua. It's a kidnapping instead of a murder. So, yeah, that's a different type of crime, but you don't know who's responsible for the kidnapping until the very end. So, yeah, sure, that it doesn't have to be murder. It could be I don't know what else it could be. A robbery, any type of crime.
Well, and sometimes there can be death that's not murder, but that circumstances of neglect or some horrible situation where someone dies, and the circumstances may seem mysterious and unknown to loved ones. So it's not murder in the sense of someone plunging a dagger into the heart, so to speak, or firing a gun, but there can be death without, what you would think of as voluntary manslaughter, I guess, but indirect forces, which can be more nefarious and more disturbing if people have not paid attention, people have been neglectful, people have not taken care, people have not protected other people. You can wind up with folks who are dead, who were murdered by indirect forces. That's
a great point.
Well, that's what happens in my book, actually. I mean, it's not a dagger to the heart, but it may as well have been.
And I think that's a great point, Amy. And like, I just love that. It's like, I love that question, by the way, too. Sorry, Unana Moise font, I think is what it says. But like, it's just I love that idea sometimes, because it's like I love a good murder mystery, and so don't get me wrong, I'm all for murder mysteries, but it's like, it is like sometimes takes a bit of nuance to craft one that's not quite. It's like something else is going on, and you can still make a very compelling mystery. In fact, like, good half of like Sherlock Holmes wasn't actually murders; they were actually just various other mysteries, right? And so all right, and we'll kind of end with this user one. We're going to jump into some trivia here in a second. And so but anonymous, just someone's with an anonymous tag said greatest detective ever. Who is the greatest detective ever? Which one do you rather enjoy? Go for it, Blair.
Well, I'd say it's
aside from yours, because I know you have to stand up for your series, and so, but greatest detective ever.
Clearly Jack Lisbon. But if I had to pick a second one, it would be probably Columbo. I actually love Columbo.
Yes.
Unbelievable detective.
I didn't even think of Columbo. Sadly, when I was looking up some trivia questions, I was like, I used to watch Columbo actually all the time, and so
yeah. Love the way you walk out of a room and then just one more thing, come back and make the perpetrator sort of dig their own grave. Unbelievable.
Go watch Columbo if you haven't seen Columbo. Everyone that's watching this, it's a really good show. And so, how about you, Amy?
Yeah, Blair, I'm so glad you said that, because I was a big Columbo fan back in the day, and I think this dates us, but so what? He was a master of indirection, right? He would lull the villain or the guilty party into thinking that
he'd hand them the rope,
that they weren't going to be found out, and he used misdirection to get them every time. You know who else did that? Since you brought up a fictional detective on TV, Tony Shalhoub in what's it called? The one
Monk.
10 years ago in Monk, yes.
Oh, Monk, yeah.
Because he presented with a lot of, let's just say, personal issues and challenges, but yet he fought his way through to the heart of the crime every time, by paying really close attention to detail, and I think that was pretty cool.
Well, and I'm glad you brought these ones up, because it's like, I loved, they were actually very different. Both of them actually were very different characters. They were a little bit more soft spoken. It was kind of nice, but I like the variety always in all mysteries when it comes to like murder mysteries and stuff. So, all right, well, here we are. We're going to do a little bit of trivia, right? This is the ultimate whodunit. Okay, so we're going to figure out who done it here. So I'm going to read some, we're going to play some trivia, and you get the crown of who done it, who's our secret murderer on this show for another year. Okay, because there'll be a year before we have another one of these, so you get crown.
Let's just say this up front. I'm going to fail, but go ahead.
Well, it's okay. I'm actually pretty terrible at trivia, so this is the fun part about being the host, is I get to look these things up, and I get to feel like I know a whole lot. And so what is that, Blair?
Just one second.
So Blair secretly did it. It's the mystery here. It's mystery solved. And so I guess the twist already. So he was motivated. All right. So I'm going to read to you a series of questions, and these are true or false. So you just got to go. So we're going to go like you either have to say like true or false. Okay, you got to make it really clear for me. Okay, so you either go true, all right, you're excited, or false. Okay, make it really clear so I know, because I always have to like look up and down. And so, an audience again, for those of you that are watching live in that live chat, feel free to play. I don't know if Blair or Amy can see that, but they're not going to cheat. They're not going to look at your answers. So no Googling from anybody. There won't even be time. And so all right. So it's either true or false. Got it? And we'll see who racks up the most points in this score. Are you ready? Any quick questions?
Let's go.
All right, let's do it. Let's figure out who done it. Who's our who done it for the year here? Okay. So, all right. The word mystery originally came from the Greek word mysterion, meaning secret rite. True or false?
True.
I'm going to say true.
That is correct. You're both correct. It is true. Mysterion. So I'm going to make a character name that since I do comics these days. That sounds like a comic villain. All right. Next up, again, true or false? In Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes books, Sherlock often says, "Elementary, my dear Watson."
False.
False.
You are both correct again. False. He actually never says that in any of Arthur Conan Doyle's books. And so it's actually a common misconception. All right. Speaking of famous mystery authors here, in Agatha Christie's famous novel Murder on the Orient Express, there are actually two murderers.
Two murders.
Two murderers.
False.
What do you say, Amy?
True.
Ooh, Blair's just pulling ahead. It's false. I know. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
Maybe you were providing a little clue there, but go ahead.
There are 12 murderers actually in that one.
Okay.
It's the old famous twist. Whenever I looked up like good twist when I was writing my first book, and that was like the first one that came up. I was like, oh, maybe I should read it. And so, all right, the mysterious and creepy murder of a family at Hinterkaifeck in 1922 is unsolved and still offers a reward for solving it.
True.
I'll say true.
You are both correct. That is true. So even after 1922, it's still up for a big reward. Actually, they always have specials on it and stuff. It's actually really creepy murder though. So beware if you're going to look that up. So, all right, number 5. The Zodiac Killer was recently apprehended thanks to modern DNA advancements.
What do you say recently?
So, just recently in the last couple of years.
Zodiac Killer. True.
I think it's false.
So Amy tying with Blair again. It is actually false. The Zodiac murders were never solved. So the person is unfortunately still out there.
Well,
somewhere.
we could thank Jake Gyllenhaal for that one because he was in the movie.
Yeah, that's right. You solved it. The real whodunit there. And so, all right. The Boxcar Children solved just under 100 mysteries.
I'm going to say true.
True.
That is actually false. They solved 153 mysteries.
Oh,
there are
that's
153 Boxcar Children books. And so, all right, number 7. The term whodunit first appeared in the classic Dick Tracy series.
False.
I'm also going to go with false.
Ooh, you're both correct on that one. So it is false. It actually first appeared in a reviewer. Actually, it was someone reviewing a book named Donald Gordon in 1933 was reviewing it and coined the term whodunit. So if you're watching this, write these fine people some reviews in their books. Authors love reviews. Check out their books down below. I'm going to plug them again. And so definitely give them a review. Maybe we'll coin your term, why done it. And so, all right, Edgar Allan Poe wrote the first mystery that spawned the mystery genre.
Debatable, but I know the book you're talking about, Murder in the Rue Morgue, and I'll say yes.
Well, yes, and I'm since he got to qualify the answer, I agree that it's attributed to him as sort of being the father of the modern mystery story. So I'm going to go with it essentially true.
And you are both correct on that. And again, like probably 80% of my questions are actually pretty debatable. Some of these, it's like definitely, yeah, you're both correct. You actually got Blair. You even got the name of the book there. And I love Edgar Allan Poe. I actually never heard of that one, so I might have to read that at some point. But
I think
yes,
I think the killer was a gorilla with a razor.
Yeah,
really?
it's very gruesome actually. It's quite gruesome and graphic and weird and bloody and strange.
That's good old Edgar Allan Poe for you. So going back to Hinter Kaifek here. All right, Jack the Ripper actually only murdered 3 people that eventually led to London's hysteria around him.
Oh, Blair, I might just say whatever you say on this one. I don't
True.
know. I mean, he had such a reputation. I don't know. I don't think he could be that renowned. I'm going to say false. It had to have been more.
I'm going to say true because it's unexpected.
Ooh, okay. Well, Amy's actually pulling just ahead on this one. It is actually false. He murdered 5 women and potentially more.
Yeah.
So they're not. There's debate around whatever. But there were confirmed 5.
You don't make history for only killing 3. I guess that's really the lesson.
So yeah, you got to aspire to something, I guess. Yeah. And so Sherlock Holmes has 2 siblings, a brother and a sister.
True. That's true. Mycroft and the other one.
You're talking about Honora Holmes. It's actually false. So false. He actually only had 1 brother. And it was Mycroft, and then recently they had the Nora Holmes series, but she was actually never in the original novel. So I guess he might be able to say true actually on that one, since he has a sister now according to TV. And so, all right, the biggest art heist in history happened in 1990, where thieves stole 13 pieces worth $300 million before being apprehended shortly after.
Well, wait a minute. Biggest heist in terms of the number of pieces or in terms of the street value? Because that is not the highest street value ever stolen. I'm getting very technical.
Enlighten me, actually. I thought it was kind of both, but
Blair, you went with true?
No, I went with false.
Oh, you went with false. Well, say it again, Josh.
All right. The biggest art heist in history happened in 1990, where thieves stole 13 pieces worth $300 million before being apprehended shortly after.
Oh, I'm going to say false. That's not the case.
So it is false. Now, I was trying to throw you off there, but it was false. But they were actually never found. So they actually did steal $300 million worth, 13 pieces. But there's still a $10 million reward for them. But according to the internet and Wikipedia, that was the biggest art heist. There might actually be a bigger one. That's another one of those ones that might be a little debatable, I guess. And so, all right, we only have just a couple questions left, just to give you an idea of the standing. Blair, you're 1 point behind Amy. Okay, so it's down to the wire. It's down to the wire here. There's only 4 questions left, including this one. Here's the greatest mystery ever. Bigfoot is real. True or false?
False.
That was a trick question. All right, we did it for the fun of it. And so who knows? All right, next up. The serial killer with the most victims had over 220 victims.
False.
True.
I always like it when there's a question mark in there. So it's actually true. His name was Dr. Harold Shipman and had possibly around 250, unfortunately.
He euthanized them, I think.
I think so.
Oh.
So I don't know. I didn't look too deeply into it. Serial killers creep me out. So it's been a while since my old horror days. So all right, 2 questions left. Blair, you have a chance here to just catch up. You're just behind. So, all right. The most famous and highest grossing mystery writer of all time is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
False.
False, because he doesn't get any royalties.
It'd be your mate James Patterson.
No, get out of here, Blair.
But I'm with Blair on this one. False.
Yeah, and you're correct. It's false. It's actually Agatha Christie. Agatha Christie is actually the one that is widely considered the most famous and highest grossing person, which is interesting nowadays because, Sherlock Holmes is really buried in the public eye, but Agatha Christie only recently had a little bit more of a Hercule Poirot coming to the forefront. So, all right. And our last question here. According to polls done by Penguin Books, the best twist of all time in a book is in the book Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk.
Palahniuk, yeah.
There you go.
True.
That's an opinion.
But according to polls done by Penguin Books.
Okay. The best twist is in the Chuck Palahniuk book about Fight Club?
Yep.
I'll say true.
I'll say false.
That is actually true according to Penguin Books, is like polls or whatever. And so I mean, Fight Club had a pretty good twist. We don't talk about it, of course, but it had a decent twist. I actually guessed it halfway through. But running down the numbers here, that was our last question. And who done it for this year? Amy won that round by 1 point. She was throwing us off with her, she said she was going to lose. So
that was luck. That was sheer luck.
Okay. All right. We know your motivation. She was studying beforehand. So,
right.
Well, Blair, Amy, we're running a little low on time, unfortunately, and so I never seem to have enough time on the show. Blair, we're definitely going to have to get you back on the show again. Again, if you haven't seen Blair's, we have his earlier video getting to talk all about his books, except for his latest ones. It's been a little bit since we had that show. It was about a year ago. And then Amy, we'll definitely have to get you on the show. Now, both of you have your books down in the description below. Is there any other way that we might be able to support you as a community, Amy and Blair?
Well, as you said before, leave a review, preferably a nice one.
Well, I can't see what you see, Josh, and I would just say that people can find all my books at amywrites.live. Pretty much the way it sounds, Amy, WRITES.live, and I've got a couple coming out. And I love meeting new readers.
Definitely. Well, thank you both so much for being on the show. I'm going to send you back down below to the Netherrealm. Just hang out for a second. So thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Josh. It was fun.
Thank you.
So that was Amy Bernstein, and Blair Denholm. And again, check out their books down below in the description down below there. Fantastic books I've read from both of these authors. Kelley Kaye, unfortunately, it was technical issues on my side of things, so she wasn't able to get in. Also, check out her books down below. We'll have to get her on in a future episode. For all of our watchers and viewers out there, hit that subscribe button if you haven't joined us before. And we'll see you in just a couple of months. It's going to be August when we jump back on for season 3 of Diabolic Shrimp. It's been a fantastic season. This is our 50th video. I never thought we'd actually be this far on this show, and that's all thanks to all of you. So thank you all so much. This has been another Diabolic Shrimp.